my talk. Here we go. How he said he living life as a gringo, where you question where you fit in every time you mingle. They say you do this with not enough that. My rapping is really bad. This life as a gringo.
Yes, hello and welcome to another episode of Life as a Gringo. I am Dramos, of course. And man, today on the show, as per usual, I'm just going to kind of give you guys an insight into my brain as we kind of do on these Tuesday episodes when we don't have a guest. I'll kind of just give you, just a bit of what I've personally been stewing on in hopes that it connects with other people out there. Now, I'm currently writing a little, I guess it's technically a book. I'm writing kind of a shortened little book of just like thoughts, ideas, confessions, a bit of my photography. And I feel weird even saying it in that way. I'm not a photographer, but just random kind of pictures. I have a film camera that I take pictures on. Anyway, it's going to be a collection of a bunch of random things like that. And I was kind of stewing on this idea over the weekend, and I ended up writing about it. And I thought it would be interesting to kind of share it in podcast form, since we're kind of probably a few months out from me being able to even release that book idea. But it's the idea of kind of having to go into a bit of seclusion sometimes to find yourself, and not even just find yourself, but also grow as a human being, and to learn and to get really clear on what it is that you want out of life, the type of people you want to surround yourself with, and even, more specifically, the type of person that you want to be yourself. And I think in life, this, especially this day and age that we live in, there's so much noise, and there's so many things to do, and so many ways to document what we're all doing. And as a result, we all constantly feel like we're missing out on something, and man, yeah, it's just a lot of distractions. And I think that it kind of hinders us from really getting in touch with ourselves and who we are, and what exactly we're feeling, and just having overall clarity of mind, body, and soul, right? So for me, the basis of this conversation kind of comes off of this story about the writer Joseph Campbell. And if you've been following me long enough, you know that this is probably one of the most impactful people on my life as far as, things that I've read. He has the quote, "Follow your bliss," which is something that stuck with me since I was in my early 20s, and something that I have plastered gigantically on the wall of my studio when you first walk in. And he's just been a big influence. And he tells one of these stories about how he, just went off into the woods essentially for a number of years. And I'll kind of go more specific about it for the people in the back segment. But overall, it's this idea of just like going into seclusion and cutting out the noise and cutting off the outside world as a whole, to really get clear on yourself, and to really educate yourself on whatever it is that interests you, right? So that was kind of this inspiration for the piece that I was writing. And I've been wanting to kind of do a podcast in regards to that, because it's been something that's been on my mind over the last few weeks as I begin to kind of integrate a bit more into the outside world and being social, I guess. Because for me, I've gone on this journey since the pandemic, and it's been life-changing. So I want to kind of share some of the concepts behind it, and just maybe inspire some of you guys to take some time for yourself, and to help, maybe figure some things out, or get clear on different aspects of your life. So without further ado, I want to get into this topic, and I'll leave you with a kind of paraphrase quote from Joseph Campbell. But he says, "The answers that you seek are in the cave that you fear." And I'm just paraphrasing a bit, but I think that's what the idea of this whole thing is. Sometimes you have to go into that cave of nothingness, and maybe get lost a bit to find the answers that, have been kind of burning at you for however long it's been, right? To find the answers that, your soul has been starving for, so to speak, right? So yeah, well, let's get into this whole conversation. First and foremost, we'll do a bit of a deep dive into Joseph Campbell and how he kind of adapted this philosophy and what he went through, and the inspiration for me, of course, as I said. So we'll do that in a segment we call For the People in the Back.
Say it louder for the people in the back.
So, like I said, Joseph Campbell has been wildly inspirational for me. He's changed my life with his writings. I mean, this is a person that died, before I was even born, but has had such a profound impact on my life. And it reminds me of this Seneca quote that I recently read, and it's kind of a bit off topic, but the idea that he says, quote, "Life is short, art is long." I'm just sort of starting with that just as a reminder that like the things that we create, the things we put out into the world, can affect people long after we're gone. I know I've said that before many times, but this Joseph Campbell, lesson that I'm talking about today is proof of that. Again, somebody that died before I was even born, and look at how much I talk about him and how much of an impact he's had on my life. Now, specifically when it comes to this story, because I know I've touched on Joseph Campbell in the past in the last season, but when it comes to this story, I remember just like, I think I was 22 years old when I picked up my first Joseph Campbell book, 21, 22. And I remember reading this story that he talks about how he just went off into the woods essentially to read, right? And now the full story, as I've done some kind of research a bit, and he talks about this, is basically, this was during a time when the stock market crashed and we went into a depression. And Joseph Campbell was someone who, was very studious. He had his master's degree. He actually only needed to complete his thesis and he would have gotten his doctorate. But instead, true to the words that he has passed on to all of us in the form of follow your bliss, instead he decided to drop out of his doctorate and go into the woods of upstate New York and literally just go into a very scheduled and very disciplined mode of deep reading for about 5 years, right? And that just sounds insane to me. I mean, I was reading a bit deeper into like some of his regiment, and this man took his reading incredibly serious, right? I mean, he talks about how, he would be reading, in 3-4 hour periods, right? And he would be just reading straight for 3-4 hour periods. And this was his discipline. He kept doing it, for that 5 years. And I think I even remember the part of the book he was talking about this being a time during Depression where, people didn't have money. And he was actually would write letters to the publishing companies and ask them if he could, have these books on like loan, or that he would pay them back later, or he'd send them back. I can't remember which one it exactly is, but publishers actually would send him books and he just kept reading and reading and reading, right? And I think the general idea of this is like selfishly taking the time to indulge in the thing that is burning, in your heart, essentially, right? Like I was always incredibly jealous when I read this time period. Like I always wanted this period for myself. I've always envisioned the idea of just like going away somewhere and creating and having no phone, no nothing, and just being lost in my creativity for an extended period of time. And it's because the way that he kind of, I guess, romanticizes this part of his life. But in reality, when you think about it, this is the time period that created the man and the mind that we know as Joseph Campbell, right? Like he had a lot of thoughts and ideas, obviously, going into this period. But the ability to be alone with his thoughts, the ability to educate himself by just, endless reading, created somebody who, man, was so well versed in the topics of life and so well educated and had so much clarity on what he believed the meaning of life was, or more so, the art of living, right? And I corrected myself there because he believed that we give meaning to life essentially with everything that we do. But this person that we're talking about was forever changed by the time that he took to invest in himself and the time that he took to be selfish and sort of cut himself off from the outside world and all of the distractions that it has, and focused on himself and becoming a better version of himself, and also focusing on his growth and his evolution, which I think sadly is something that we have trouble with in the modern era, right? And now obviously we can't all run out into the woods, abandon our lives as we know it, right? Especially in today's day and age, it's really tough to do that. We all have bills to pay. We have family. There aren't many opportunities like that, right? Where the world slows down. Obviously, the pandemic was one of them, and I'll kind of get into that a bit. But I think it's more of an analogy for being unafraid to be selfish and just do what is speaking to you in that moment, right? And I also think the idea of him being so close to completing his doctorate, he put in all that work, all he had to do was his thesis, and him deciding, you know what, this isn't what I want anymore. I'm just going to follow, my bliss, right? Without sounding redundant, but I think it speaks to the idea that, the notion that we can't do something or now is not the right time. Those are all things that we create in our head, obstacles we create in our mind, barriers we create in our mind. And again, everybody's circumstance is a bit different, but I think if you truly broke it down, if you really, made it a priority, you could find a way to carve out, that time you need for yourself to be selfish, to work on whatever it is that is speaking to you, right? And I just think in multiple ways, this story is incredibly inspiring. And I know for me, was really, man, something that I longed to do. And it took me 10 years to do so. And I didn't even do it willingly. But I think, just like anybody else, I made excuses for why I can't do something like this, why I can't be this selfish. And don't get me wrong, I had to be selfish in many ways to chase after what I wanted. But I think I never sat down to truly find myself and truly, figure out who I was. And that's what I kind of want to get into in the Mi Gente segment and talk a bit about how I had my journey in the woods, and I had my time where I was selfish and kind of cut any of the noise out and found a lot of clarity and a lot of growth personally. So I want to get into that in our Mi Gente segment. But first, let's take a quick break and then we'll be right back. Mi Gente. So for me, my time in the woods came 10 years after I had read about Joseph Campbell's. For 10 years, I fantasized about what this would be like, and I made plans for, shortened periods of time like this, but it was always like, oh, it's too expensive to go rent a cabin in the woods on Airbnb. Oh, I don't have the time. I got to work this week, blah, 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 right? Always had an excuse. And then bam, the pandemic hits, right? And we're given this opportunity, right? And by the way, when I speak about the pandemic and COVID and everything that happened with that, I don't want to take away from anybody's pain, the loss that people had of loved ones as a result of it. I personally, lost my grandmother during that time, not from COVID, but she passed away, and we weren't able to be with her in the hospital because of the lockdown. We weren't able to, have a funeral for her or bury her, because of the lockdown and the quarantine and all that stuff. So, on that end, obviously a lot of loss, a lot of devastation, but personally, as far as my journey as a human being and where I am in my life and even my career, I look back on the pandemic and I'm grateful for the mindset that I adapted during it, right? And I've mentioned this a few times, but I know I saw the pandemic as an opportunity, right? And not at first, listen, at that time I was making a lot of money DJing. That was, rivaled my money with the Breakfast Club. Probably actually I was making more money DJing. And it was just a huge, source of income for me, and that dried up real quick overnight, and I had to figure out what the hell I was going to do financially. And that was obviously a really scary thought. But, once you kind of get over that knee-jerk reaction, for me, I adapted the idea of seeing all of this as an opportunity, right? Because I think I had begun to recognize prior to that I was outgrowing a lot of aspects of my life. I was outgrowing a lot of the people around me. They didn't have the same hunger and thirst for growth as I did. They seemed really, happy with just sort of the Groundhog's Day that was our life, especially at that point, being in the music industry, the entertainment industry, and everything that comes along with that, and I felt like I was outgrowing a lot of that. And I felt very alone in my mindset shift that was happening. And at the same time, career-wise, I was feeling like I had outgrown the things that, I was a part of, and, even more than I was aware of at the time. I mean, it took me, even up until recently to really recognize what was important to me and why I was so unhappy in that situation, even the ones that followed. But, I recognized, getting back to the pandemic and the mindset, I recognized this opportunity. The world is at a standstill. There's not a lot of noise out there. There aren't things to do. People aren't reaching out left and right to go to this event or that event. We're all kind of in our own zone, and some people are going to, use it and as a means to kind of just fulfill their vices and drinking or watching TV, sleeping all day, whatever it was. But for me, I knew that I wanted to come out of this, thing whenever it happened. I want to come out of it a better person. I wanted to come out of it in a better place than I was going into it. And I embraced the self-isolation of it all. I know for me during that time, I read a lot. I tried learning a bunch of different things. I dove into a lot of different creative ideas, some of which were terrible, some of which were good. A lot of them I never, will show anybody, right? Or a lot of them will never see the light of day. But I was learning about myself, right? I was, putting in the time and effort, right? I had a regiment with the content that I was creating at the time, and I was pushing myself to learn. I was pushing myself to be more authentic. I was finding my voice, and I was breaking a lot of the bad habits that I had developed, as far as trying to, live a certain life, right? Live this sort of shallow, egotistical life that I needed at the time, or I thought that I needed, right? And this time gave me a lot more clarity to realize, what was really important to me. And I think it also was a blessing where I didn't have to cut people off or not spend as much time with certain friend groups because there was nothing to do, right? I had an excuse, and it allowed me to put that distance needed. And I'm grateful for that, because it gave me that clarity once again to realize certain things. I know, for example, for me, a lot of my friendships, not all of them, but a lot of them were friendships out of convenience, right? People that I work with, people that I was around as a result of what I did for a living. And while a lot of them are really great people, and a lot of them I would genuinely consider a friend, there were a lot of relationships within that lacked depth, right? We didn't talk about real shit. We didn't connect on a deeper level. It was, about being able to go out and party and do crazy shit, and that's it, right? And enjoy this life of working and working in the entertainment industry and living in the New York City area. Really, that was what our friendship was essentially based off of, right? And I got really clear on, I don't want those types of relationships in my life. I don't want shallow relationships, in my life. I'd rather be by myself at that point, because they're not serving me anything. And at the same time, I got really clear on, what were the causes that I stood behind, right? I think even tapping into, my idea of what it meant to represent my culture and be Latin, right? And the identity crisis that I had developed for years throughout the course of my life. Like, I really explored that and found a lot more confidence in that. And I think that, I found confidence because I was just throwing myself out there more and more, right? I was unafraid to fail because everybody was sort of putting themselves out there. Like, if you think about that time period, it was really interesting because you had, the biggest artists, celebrities, influencers, whatever it is, we were all doing the same shit, right? Like, everybody was hopping on Instagram Live from their house, not really doing anything, or they were trying to find creative ways to pass the time, right? And it was like, kind of janky because nobody was, sure how to make this whole digital thing work yet, right? Zoom was a new thing. Instagram Live being this regular was a whole new thing, right? And it felt like we were all kind of on the same level, and it definitely allowed for more experimentation without the fear of judgment, and the stakes were a bit lower because, we were all just trying to figure out this whole world that we were living in, where we relied heavily on technology, but like the technology hadn't yet caught up to what we needed, right? And again, that was such a blessing because I was able to put myself out there. I've talked about the daytime show I did on Instagram, right? And like, I was speaking authentically, and pushing myself each and every day. And I even remember the first time I did it feeling so nervous and awkward, like, oh my God, I'm live and people are watching. But like, pushing myself outside of my comfort zone, was huge and like laid the groundwork for where I am right now. And, I think what I'm kind of getting at is that time alone was so life-changing, right? And it's now something that I've implemented even into my life right now, understanding the importance of all of that, right? Like I think people have said a bunch of times that getting bored is good. Sometimes you have to make yourself bored because it makes you begin to get creative on ways to entertain yourself or to do things, right? And I think that that's what that time period was. And I think I got really clear on the person that I wanted to be, right? Like, who did I want to exist as in this world, you know? And, I know for a while I had wanted a relationship of real substance, and of course I had other relationships or, casually dated other people, but I never found that real relationship of substance. And the reality was I wasn't ready for it at that time. I hadn't done the work. And I think over the pandemic, those couple months that summer, like I really began to lay down the foundation of what I wanted the next chapter of my life to look like, and again, that's that clarity that you develop by spending that time with yourself, being honest with yourself, having conversations. I mean, I journaled and I was reading some of them recently. It's just crazy to me to see my mindset back then and some of the darkness that I was going through, and being grateful that I did that though, right? Because I fought through it. I was putting in the work to understand myself, to gain that clarity of what, was important to me and the person that I wanted to be. And again, once I began to develop that clarity on like, okay, this is the type of life that I want to live, right? And this is the type of person that I want to be. And this is the kind of relationship that I want. And this is how I want to be in a relationship. And I'm laughing to myself right now because, here I am thinking I had it all figured out. And as any good relationship, once you get into it, you realize that you have so much growth to do. But my point being that when I began to get clear on that, literally like the person I had always been searching for, like found me, and again, it's been an entire journey of growing even beyond that. But I think that we oftentimes find ourselves in situations that we're not crazy about or super happy with, or that really fulfill us. And it could be career-wise, could be personal, friendships, romantic, whatever it might be, family-wise, right? Because even during this time, I began to have like once a week dinners with my parents, which was like unheard of, right? And that completely began to change our relationship, right? But again, what I'm talking about is the idea of that time spent alone, right? And really getting clear on what you want and creating that mindset. And I think, so many of us are in reaction mode when we're in everyday life, right? And shit happens so quickly, right? And we're so caught up on what is going on and like, man, this horrible news that's popping up on social media and what our parents want us to do, our friends, our spouse, and the expectation, I have to go to this, but I don't really feel like getting a day to myself, blah, 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 right? We're being, pulled in so many different directions each and every day. And I think so many of us are afraid to say like, hey, like I need to say no to this right now and focus on myself for a second, right? And that's like, the greatest form of self-love is being able to say no. And I feel like I've said that before, somebody on the show has, but it's about, setting boundaries. And again, the pandemic set boundaries for me. I didn't have to do it, but I've carried that into the rest of my life and understanding that, I need to say no to things. I need to spend time with myself. I need to experiment. I need to try shit. I need to, give myself the freedom to fail, right? And be unafraid to fail and try out ideas, right? But, all of that comes from being a bit selfish, and I'm not saying you have to become, an asshole or something like that, but the idea of being selfish with your time, right? I talked about this a bit on the mental health episode, but like for me, I need like an hour a day of just like getting lost and in a zone, right? And I have to be selfish about that each day, right? Doesn't matter what I'm doing. Doesn't matter who I'm with. I need to be able to express that to whomever is around me. Like I need to go off and do this and not be bothered for an hour. And then I'm feeling a lot better about myself, right? But that hour gives me clarity. It gives me the freedom to create. And again, it's about seclusion in a positive way, right? Not the type of thing where you cut yourself off and you're depressed because you're alone, you have nobody to talk to. But I think healthy seclusion, I think doing it on purpose is where a lot of the answers are going to come from, right? I think oftentimes we're moving throughout life and we might be feeling anxious, we might be feeling depressed, we're sad, we're a bit unhappy, we're unfulfilled, and we kind of have an idea of where it's coming from. We're not really sure, but we don't have the time to sit down and have that conversation with us, right? many people work. We have a family. You have, kids. You have fucking commitments that you have. You got to make dinner. You want to get to bed at a certain time so you don't feel tired in the morning, right? Like, it's really difficult to make that time for yourself. I mean, shit. I have a routine that's literally like 2 hours in the morning just to do that, and I'm blessed that I'm in a position to do so. And there are some mornings where I can't do it, even when I'm the person creating my own schedule and I'm literally working for myself, right? I still, last week had like 3 days where I just was not able to get into that routine because of so many other outside things that I was trying to deal with, and you feel it, right? And you feel the difference. And I think I feel it even more and more. I'm more aware of it now that like something is off because it's become such a consistent thing for me in my life. But, pre-pandemic, that wasn't my regular life. Like, that was my regular state of being. Anxious, but I'm not really sure why. Depressed, not really sure why. Not feeling fulfilled, not sure why, but I probably just need to like, get that next accomplishment. Then I'll feel better, right? But these are all like shallow ways of looking at life. And I don't mean that in the way of like material things. I mean that in like, you're literally just like giving your knee-jerk reaction to why you think you feel something and then not even exploring it, right? And oftentimes we might be feeling something and it may appear that it's for this reason, but there's probably something deeper and we have to peel it back a bit. That's why something like therapy is great, right? Because you actually have to just sit there and like talk about situations and they just keep pressing you on like, but why do you feel that way? But why do you think you felt that way, right? So it's forcing you to have to sit there, slow down, and be present to all that's happening around you. And I think those moments of seclusion are not optional. They are completely necessary towards finding your happiness and also getting clear on what it is that you want and who you want to be. I think those are all sort of, things that we're not even like taught to think about. Obviously, there's so many things like that, but I don't even think it's on most of our radars that like beyond just like wanting to be a good person, like really having a clear vision of the type of life that you want to lead, and the type of person that you want to become. What kind of parent do I want to be? What kind of partner do I want to be? What kind of man do I want to be? How do I want to see the world? How do I want to spend my time, right? And like really planning that out. And you don't have to be there right now, but having the time to slow down and understand the steps that it takes to get to where you want to be, right? And then taking the time before even that, right? The time to just identify where do you want to be? Who do you want to be, right? And again, life happens so fucking fast. I can almost guarantee that most of us don't have the time to sit back and have those conversations. And for me, I guess the general idea of this episode and what I want to push, I don't think you need to have those 5 years in the woods, right? Or you don't need to have a fucking catastrophic world event like a pandemic happen, right? For me, that was obviously life-changing, but let's be real, that lockdown lasted, a couple months, maybe a summer, right? And after that, I still kept that mindset going. I mean, maybe a little bit of caution when it came to the pandemic, but I think also understanding how much had happened for me because I cut out so many outside things from my life, right? And I really just got really specific on what was important to me, who was important, who were those core people that I couldn't go without seeing or spending time with, and what were those, core things that I couldn't go without spending time doing, or being a part of, right? And I've begun to obviously live life a little bit more, but to be completely honest, in the last 2 years, I have still been in that seclusion, and I'm forever grateful for it, and forever grateful for the mindset that I've developed because I've had such a clarity on who I am. I mean, I was talking to my girlfriend, it was a couple of weeks ago, and randomly, in conversation, she was just kind of like, the man that you were when you were in Jersey City, which is where I was living at the time, when we met and the pandemic, is a completely different person than the one that sits in front of me. And she meant that in a good way, right? And that's not to say I was a shithead back then or anything like that, but I've had so many huge leaps and bounds as far as my growth as a human being goes, right? And it's undoubtedly because I've made it a point to set really strict boundaries on how I spend my time and what I do, and to really invest in my own growth, right? It's an investment. It's an investment to be saying no to outside things. It's an investment to not give in to your vices or your desires, right? It's an investment to take the time to educate yourself, right? To force yourself to not just sit in front of the TV when you have free time, right? Like I try and I keep books all around me, and in the moments where I'm like, oh, I want to just like sit here mindlessly watch TV, or I'm about to go scrolling through my phone, I try to pick a book up instead and read a few pages, right? Or I try and keep a reading habit each night, before I go to bed, I read, right? And sometimes I'm really good about that habit. Sometimes I fall off of it, right? But I'm living my life with intention of the person I want to be. I want to be somebody who reads a ton of books and learns, so many invaluable things that I can then use to be better for the outside world, right? I want to journal and dissect my thoughts, right? I want to be a person who's very much in touch with the things that he's feeling. If I'm having a shitty day, I wake up on the wrong side of the bed, I want to investigate that, right? I want to be present to what I'm feeling, and I want to be present to those around me. That's still something I'm working really hard on, and not getting caught up in everything else. But again, I'm understanding the person that I want to be. I have the clarity to see that person, the pathway to get there. And then I'm living intentionally, and I'm not letting the outside world seep into, other aspects of my life, right? That they don't need to be in. I'm very much, happy staying home on a Friday night, right? Like this last Friday night, I stayed home. My girlfriend was out with one of her friends. I literally stayed at home. I got some rest that I needed, right? And then I just wrote. I just indulged with what was in my head, and I allowed myself to get lost in my creativity, but also to vent and to, just explore what was going on in my head. And I woke up feeling amazing the next morning, and that night going to bed feeling amazing, right? Because I had a sense of clarity that only comes from taking the time to just be with yourself, right? And that's the sort of notion that I think I took away from the idea of Joseph Campbell being in the woods for 5 years reading, right? It's the investment in yourself and the investment in pursuing what it is that you want, right? He wanted to be a far more well-rounded person, more educated human being. And he dedicated himself to that, with dropping out of his doctorate program, going into the woods, and on top of that, developing a routine where he would read for 4 hours straight, like 3 hours a day. You know what I mean? So that was a dedication towards becoming the person that he wanted to, and understanding that he probably had to cut out the majority of his social engagements and the outside world as a whole, and the expectations that he or the people around him have placed on him. He had to cut all of that out to truly get clear on who he wanted to be, and then to do that work, and that's kind of what I'm getting at with this entire story, and pushing you to understand you don't have to feel guilty if you decide to begin to cut people out of your life, or certain elements of your life. And I want to kind of rest on that, because I want to use that as a bit of the launching point for our conclusion stew, as we kind of tie everything we talked about today in a neat little bow. But first, let's take a quick break, and then we'll be right back.
Time for conclusion stew.
All right, so I kind of tabled it with the idea of guilt, right? And I think that this is probably one of the things that holds people back so much from spending that time with themselves. That, and probably the fear of missing out, right? But we all feel so bad. Oh, I can't say no to this person. They've been asking me to hang out for a couple weeks now, right? So let me just go. I don't really want to. I'm tired from work. I probably should catch up on this or that, right? But you know what? I feel really bad. I'm going to go ahead and do it. All of us have had that moment, or we're like, man, I'm not going out tonight. And then you like look on Instagram and you see your friends are at like a bar nearby. It looks like the best time ever. You're just like, you know what? Fuck it. I don't want to miss out on this. You go and it's underwhelming at best, right? And you're like, I should have stayed home. And now you live with that regret, right? And then you wake up late on, whatever, Saturday or Sunday, you're hungover, or half your day is gone at that point, and your weekend's just about done. It's Monday. It's time to go to work, right? All of us feel this unnecessary guilt, this unnecessary burden to show up for others, right? And again, I'm not saying to not be there for the people that you care about. Those are real situations. But your friend wanting to go to the bar, grab drinks, go out to dinner, that's not something that you have to be there for. Of course, if it's somebody you enjoy spending time with, that you feel recharged, go ahead and do that. But not at the expense of setting aside the time that you want to for yourself. Like if you've been able to set that time aside, if you've been able to really hone in on what you're feeling and who you are, you feel well rested mentally and physically, and then, you get asked to do that, sure. But if you're not in the mood for it, if you feel like you're not up for it, if you had other plans just to be with yourself, don't feel guilty saying no, right? Like, it's important to set those boundaries. Those boundaries that we set for ourselves are an incredible piece to living the life that we want and being the type of person that we want to be. Again, we need that rest and we need that time away from the outside world for clarity, to really get in touch with who we are, what we want, and where we want to be. Again, oftentimes we feel emotions, we feel like we're reacting to something, but we're not really sure what it is. We give ourselves a superficial answer. Oh, I'm mad because this guy cut me off today and that ruined my entire day. It's probably something deeper than that, right? Like, because something as simple as that shouldn't ruin your entire day, right? I woke up in a bad mood today, and I'm telling my story. I woke up in a bad mood today, and I was feeling a bit of like anger and resentment that I ended up staying up later than I want to on a Sunday, and I ended up getting up later today than I normally would. And I started placing blame, and the reality is, when I sat down and like just talked to myself and listened to what my inner self was trying to tell me, it wasn't that I was mad that I woke up late, and I wasn't really mad at this my girlfriend had come over, right? So we were hanging out, and the Yankees were playing late, so it was a whole thing anyway. But I was placing blame all over the place. It's the fucking Yankees, it's my girlfriend, it's my my dog for being a pain in the ass and not relaxing, wanting to have to go out and take a late walk. I'm placing blame all over the place on like, oh, now my whole day is ruined. But it has, it had nothing to do with that. When I really broke down like what was wrong with me, why I was feeling so tense and so anxious, it was because this entire last week I kept getting pulled into things that I couldn't get out of. And as a result, I wasn't spending the necessary time with myself, like indulging in my creativity, right? I said that I need like an hour of that just getting lost to really feel good. I hadn't done that again for like 3 or 4 days, right? Because I'd had people working on my house here, and I had to be there to help them out. I had to go pick up materials, and then I'm doing a bunch of this and that, right? So I got lost in life, and I just got too tired to even be able to sit down and focus on things, with the exception of Friday night when I got to write. But internally I was feeling anxious because I wasn't doing the things that like bring me that calm. I had a lot of pent up angst as a result of not having that thing to release it, right? These last few days of last week, right? So today, waking up late, which shouldn't be that big of a deal, because the beauty of working for yourself is that I make my own hours, right? So normally it wouldn't have been that big of a deal, but for me it represented, man, another fucking day where I'm not going to be able to like do what I need to do to feel good, right? And again, without taking that time and having the time today, even though I woke up late, like I was like, fuck this, I'm going to really like hone in on what's wrong with me and meditate on it and write a bit, journal about it. I had to take that time of seclusion. And then again, to take the time to be creative, I threw my headphones on and blocked out the world for an hour, right? But spending that time with myself, that seclusion, that time in the quote unquote woods, right? Again, allowed me to really tap into what was going on with me internally, and then allowed me to not let it ruin the rest of my day as it probably would have had before I began to discover this and do the work, right? So in the macro and the bigger picture of our lives, fixing the things that need fixing, or getting clear on what needs changing, or man, where we want to grow or how we're going to get there, we need that time in the woods, that seclusion, that time to ourselves to find the clarity to figure it all out. And again, you don't have to go in the woods for 5 years. You don't have to sit in the house for 2 months. It's just setting that designated time for yourself on a regular basis. And it's non-negotiable, Doesn't matter who calls you to go out. Doesn't matter what your spouse, wants to do. They want to watch a movie or something. Like, if you set that time for yourself, they need to understand that it's necessary for you, and you need to stay dedicated to that and stay disciplined, right? Same thing as Joseph Campbell. He created a method to his reading so that he can be as efficient as humanly possible. And that's what you have to do. I need to carve out X amount of time for myself each week or each day so that I can be as efficient as possible, in making myself mentally healthy, and also getting to the place that I want to be, and becoming the person that I want to be, right? And I think another component of that is what are you ingesting, right? Like Joseph Campbell didn't go in the woods to, sit there and watch, TV or listen to the radio all day long, right? He went into the woods with the intention of reading. And why was he reading? He wanted to educate himself. He wanted to learn as much as he possibly could. He wanted to gain as much knowledge as he possibly could, with the intention of then being able to be more well-versed on his views on the world and the art of living, right? And again, as a result, came out of the woods as one of the most brilliant authors and philosophers of all time, right? Like the premise of his idea of the art of living and the hero's journey is the premise for every story that we know in life. I'm talking about like Star Wars and all that stuff. Is all based upon the work of Joseph Campbell, right? And it's just insane to think about. I did a whole episode about him last season. If you want to check it out, I don't remember what it's called. It might be the hero's journey. But yeah, I mean, I again, it's about being intentional with how you spend your time and also what you say no to, what you set boundaries for. And I can tell you, for me, getting really clear on that, getting so much better at saying no, being unafraid to disappoint people, quote unquote, has proven for me to have a far more fulfilled life and has gotten me so much closer, so much faster to the man that I want to be. And I will continue to do that. Currently, I live a life where I'm like half in the woods, half outside, right? But more leaning towards the woods. But I think that's kind of the balance of what you need, right? You have to exist somewhere in between where you're healthily doing what you have to do and interacting with the outside world, but then also spending that time in the woods with yourself, getting clear on everything that is you. And with that said, thank y'all so much for tuning into today's episode. I hope that made sense. It's a bit of a ramble of what's been going on in my head. Sometimes I get lost in it, and I don't know if it was helpful or even made sense, and until I listen back during the editing process. But hopefully that made sense to y'all. Hopefully it resonated. Definitely let me know at DJ Dramos on Instagram what resonated, and what you thought of these concepts and maybe how you might apply them to your own life. I'd love to hear that. Man, Dramos.com. Check out that merch. And man, if you haven't yet, please rate, review the show. Give us a little comment. It's always appreciated. With that said, I'll catch y'all on Thursday for our Thursday Trends episode. Until then, stay safe. Talk to you soon. Peace.